My name is Daniel Cook, and today I'll be presenting the final briefing on the Safeguarding America's Future and Environment Act. And before I begin, a quick show of hands, who's ever seen a polar bear? Oh, we got a few. Oh, great. Well then you know how beautiful these creatures are. That they're huge. They're like the size of a car. They're covered in that pale white fur. I saw a polar bear one time in the San Diego Zoo many years ago, and as a child, I was just amazed by the size and the ferocity of this creature, but also the gracefulness of it. I was swimming in one of those like underwater tanks, and it was just it was quite a sight. But why am I telling you about this? It's because the polar bear is one of many species that is being adversely affected by climate change. Rising temperatures are diminishing its habitat and altering its food patterns. As you can see, the polar bear is in a somewhat precarious situation because it cannot adapt to climate change fast enough. So you might wonder, what can be done? Today I'll be telling you a little bit more about climate change and how it affects wildlife, as well as presenting a program designed to help wildlife adapt to climate change. Just some background, the SAFE Act was first introduced in 2011, and it's currently in the House again. It's a non-regulatory bill that's designed to provide grants to states for wildlife adaptation programs and to support those states by increasing efficiency at the federal level, increasing coordination between various agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then finally, the SAFE Act intends to implement an overarching national strategy that provides strategic goals and actions for conservation managers. At the end of the day, its purpose is to protect species from the negative effects of climate change, thereby also protecting the benefits that those species provide. And what are some of these benefits? These are just a few ways of thinking about all the great things that wildlife give us, and then a few examples. First of all, cultural significance. The salmon has immense significance to the tribes of the Pacific Northwest. The bald eagle, pretty significant to Americans. There's also financial incentives. Those salmon contribute over $540 million to Washington State alone. The trees of America provide the spaces for hunting, hiking, camping that help contribute to $646 billion of outdoor recreational spending annually. And then finally, the plants and species of ecosystems like the salt marshes of Jamaica Bay here in New York City help hold the soil together to protect New York City and other cities from extreme weather events such as hurricanes. Those are just a few examples and a few ways of thinking about all the great things that wildlife give us. And they all have in common the fact that they're undergoing negative effects from climate change because the species involved cannot adapt fast enough. Those salmon are under stress from rising temperatures in their water, and as well as altered stream flows from melting glaciers. The trees are weakened by seasonal changes as well as droughts, which is making them vulnerable to wildfires as well as infestation by destructive species such as the pine beetle. And finally, those salt marshes that help protect cities like New York are themselves now being eroded by more frequent and more intense weather events. Many efforts are underway to help protect, conserve, and manage these species, but they're disconnected, they might be redundant, and overall they're lacking in a comprehensive national strategy. The SAFE team has designed this program to improve the ability of one federal agency, the Fish and Wildlife Service, to support adaptation practices as well as coordinate with other federal agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency and NOAA. So this is an implementation of the SAFE Act at the agency level, focused on the Fish and Wildlife Agency, we've identified 3 sort of thematic goals: aiding conservation, so helping species, enhancing capacity, so enhancing the administrative abilities of the Fish and Wildlife Service for adaptation practices, and then increasing knowledge, so increasing our understanding of how climate change affects wildlife. Now, the Fish and Wildlife Service was founded to protect, conserve, and manage species, but when it was founded, it didn't include anything about climate change. So our program intends to continue its mission, but shifting its strategy to address climate change as a priority now. This is a sort of program that could be, in the future, modeled and coordinated in those partner agencies. But in the first year, it's going to be focused on the headquarters level, taking up roughly $5.5 million or 14% of headquarters budget. These actions, again, are going to be shifting Fish and Wildlife Service's strategy towards climate change adaptation for wildlife. And because of that strategic and personnel-oriented focus, most of that spending is going to be on personnel. So this is about focusing at the top level, the strategic level of one agency, and then after the first year, integrating that into the regional level of the Fish and Wildlife Service, and then coordinating it with other federal agencies, as well as state, local, and tribal governments. In the short term, its success is going to depend on how well it can improve that coordination. And then in the long term, it intends to reduce those negative impacts of climate change on wildlife. So, in other words, making sure that zoos aren't the only place where you can see polar bears. It's important to keep in mind that our program is just one piece of the puzzle of adapting to climate change. Climate change is going to be widespread and long-term. And I've started and ended here with the polar bear, but as we've seen, many species are going to be affected by climate change adversely, and it's up to agencies like the Fish and Wildlife Service to ensure that those vulnerable species survive and continue to provide us with those benefits that we've seen. And hopefully, by providing those, by helping those species adapt, we'll also improve our own chances of prospering despite the negative effects of climate change. I'd like to express my gratitude to my team, and thank you all for your time. Kenzie.
Hey Daniel, thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering, in your program design, do you have any specific measurements you'll use to see how effective that coordination is?
So we talked about some measurements, such as a meeting to make sure that we have a certain amount of, say, partners that we've identified to coordinate with, as well as the results of that contact. That's one thing of many, and Averill could tell you a little more about that.
There's, well, with our design, we were thinking that there would be a series of things. There would be both collection of data that would then be reported. So the teams and individuals who are actually assigned to complete a task would initially be meeting on a weekly basis. Then they would be, this data would be synthesized by managers and then reported up to directors on a quarterly basis, who would then provide feedback. So they would look and see, are we meeting these, are we meeting like our benchmarks on the schedule that was defined? And if not, how would we adjust to meet the
Another question over here?
Kevin.
Thank you, Daniel. Aside from some of the metrics that Averill just discussed, does the bill provide any guidance for how often states and local actors should attempt to do wildlife stock assessment to basically have a review for how populations are recovering?
That's a great question. The bill doesn't specifically address that. The national strategy, which is a strategy that was devised in 2013 by the Fish and Wildlife Service and other partner agencies, does give some suggested actions that include taking stock of vulnerable species and then assessing like how much might this species be adversely affected by climate change, and then you can, after you implement a certain intervention, you can compare was it successful or not. Did that answer your question?
Okay. There's time for one more if we have one. Okay.
Hey Daniel, thanks for your presentation. So you guys picked the Fish and Wildlife Service as a focus of your presentation, but are there, does the SAFE Act also intend to assist other agencies, and which agencies do you think that they would target?
So the SAFE Act does sort of create a joint implementation working group similar to the Strong Act's interagency working group, and the agencies in that working group include the Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as NOAA, EPA, BLM, or Bureau of Land Management, and a few others.